Welcome to sunset in Pineland. We're closing in on 7 p.m. here, United States East Coast. Want to thank you for being with me this evening. So we got the light as well set up as I think I can manage. A little tweak it just a little bit. But Dana asked me to step here with her because she wanted to listen, but she's asking me not to be too loud. So hopefully my voice will be easy enough for you to hear, and I'll try not to get too excited. Although, when you get into a show, it might happen. But I've been promised I'll be sent downstairs if I go over, library tones. But that's okay. It's been a long day, got a lot done. I was hoping to have a morning show today, but it just didn't happen because we were having an internet outage. I don't know what it was about, but everything's working fine now. So excited to be with you this evening. Want to just go through thanking everyone who's here, thank everyone who prays for us, all the members of the community, the Twitter community at Real Pinelander. I reached out to my 5,000 Facebook friends, although I probably know about 20 of them because, that's how Facebook goes. And of course, the Telegram community, which is the heart of the Pineland Project, t.me/Atlantic Homeland. I very much want to thank all of you. Thank everyone who supports the program, getting the books on Amazon. Excited to say I wrote another chapter of Surviving the Fall of America today. So we got 5 chapters to go, and we're rolling good. In fact, I shared some personal stories that were pretty interesting. I think you'll like that book. Excited to see we got already getting up almost to a dozen people here, according to my little thing. Please hit the like and subscribe. And thank you for everyone's here. Thank you for that, Templar. I appreciate that. And if you want to, during the program, certainly welcome super chats, but I'll answer your questions anyway after we finish the reading. Try to save them more towards the end. I will take the time to do that. We're going to read a story today that I shared with you in the community. Good to see you, Joseph. I also want to thank those who support the program. Just so you know, the Venmo's CVC PRV, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine, 04739. This is a community-run program. This is a community-run project. And as the world goes insane, we are amongst the sane voices trying to find a way to survive it, get through it. And that's really what today's show is going to be about once we get into it proper. We're going to talk about 5th generation warfare. One theory of what it is. We're going to use an excellent piece by James Corbett. It was posted on March 27th, 2022. If you look in your community page and you want to read along with it, I certainly would be welcoming to that. And what I will do is offer some detailed annotation and give the sort of story behind the story, some of this, because what you find is just like we found with first, the whole Trump election thing, and then the whole January 6th thing, and then the whole COVID thing, and the gun thing, and the Ukraine thing, is that we're constantly being subjected to these kind of crazy wars where nothing really changes at a deeper level other than we get impoverished, more technologically controlled. It's like Russell Brand actually did a good video today I was watching where he was saying that, they're saying Ukraine needs to be saved and everything's important, but they still have to pay their debt payments on time, which shows you that the bankers don't go away. They just find new ways to control you. And if you look at that and you look even deeper than that, how money's beginning to break, and we're going to talk about this in the next book a lot, but you look at how currency's transforming to information control, you see the effort to hack biology and a way to rethink the relationship between man and the state. Like the Chinese literally envision democracy as a single collective. It's crazy how they're looking at these things. But what we are dealing with is a fight against human sovereignty, and that's World War III. It's not Russia versus NATO. It's the whole establishment versus you trying to shape and shift your opinion in a way where you don't even have the ability to exist outside of things. Like even today, I'm like looking, because I just went on Godlike Productions, just as an example. And if you've never been there, it's kind of like a long-term conspiracy theory in the internet. These are the top 4 stories I literally see. Just reading aloud. Unconfirmed sources from Russia. Russian army captured U.S. Major General Roger L. Cloutier Jr. in Mariupol. So that will be bad. Number 2, let's see what else we got. Goodbye petrodollars. Saudi Arabia and UAE told U.S. to go pound salt. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan blames the U.S. for trying to overthrow the government. And apparently we are trying to remake the world all at once, and the only thing we're doing is basically running Germany out of oil and fuel while they continue to apologize for World War II. So it's not working too well, and a lot of places have had enough of America. And America was the world leader, and we were put in a position to do that, and all these relationships are changing. But if you want to have a world order, you need to have a bad guy. America's being set up to be the bad guy. Now, in some ways, we were the bad guy, but the Pax Americana was probably no better or no worse than a lot of other things that have been set up. And if you think the Chinese or Russians or the are going to be any more beneficent. You really haven't been paying attention to any of history. But I put that out there because when you're going to make an omelet, you crack a bunch of eggs. And unfortunately, the eggs are being cracked is the West. And it's being cracked in a way where at the same time, we are seeing our money destroyed. We're not doing things to improve our fuel development. We're not doing things to improve our energy. We're not putting out new technologies. We're not reducing debts. We're not helping our people. We're not doing energy extraction. We're not doing anything except literally watching our insane leadership set us all up for a great fall. And you know what? Maybe that's not so bad if we can survive it. I mean, I don't know what's supposed to be the answer. Superman, Elon Musk buying Twitter and then connecting us all to Starlink? Who the hell knows? Not feeling very confident and optimistic about it. But what I want you to know as we go through this is that that war is a big part of the story, that we are now being shifted and shaped, and we're being kind of locked in place by an inability to act, where our opinions are being acted upon constantly, where we are dealing with the algorithm telling us what to think. And that's one of the big things. Good to see you, Richard, and good to see you, Chris. One of the things I want you to understand, and this is a big Pinelander movement that I'm going to say, is end the algorithm. I would love to see on social media just what people actually think if everything wasn't being curated. Like, there are channels that would be way bigger. There are ideas that would be way more important, but you're not allowed to put them out there because this is being artificially controlled. And to what extent? You know, is it just about control mechanism? Are we fighting a last times war? Like, literally, I was listening to a guy who's saying avoid caves because Nephilim are going to come out, and they were fighting, and another guy said, well, we're making AI gods to fight them, so because we can't fight against them. And we live in a world where crazy is now possible because technology is changing the nature of what life is. And that one would wonder when God's going to make his appearance. If you believe the book, and I do, it doesn't look like it's very far from now. But until that happens, we're going to have to survive this craziness. We're going to have to show greater discernment, which means a greater expression of faith for those of you who listen to our Sons of Dust ministry things. But it also means that you have to begin opening your mind to the idea that this world has become a much bigger fight. And the fight that you're really fighting, the battlefront that matters most in this war, is the action being taken against you each and every day, each and every night, each and every story, each and every interaction. And that so many of our people are already lost, right? Whether it's because they decided to become genetic pincushions, some people pick that, whether it's because they couldn't escape the social milieu, whether they can't escape their own normalcy bias. And I'm not here to tell you this isn't weird. It's incredibly weird. Good to see you, Crumb. It's insanely weird, and it's hard to believe. But just because you don't want to believe something, and just because something's difficult, doesn't mean it isn't true. You know, if you go back 100 years and you explain things, like if you went back 5 years and explained how the world was working, now people would be like, "What? What are you smoking? Pass me some of that." And we are at a point where we really have to think that way. So throw out the idea of what's impossible and look at what happens. Look at your daily interactions. Look at what's happening to you. And if you have that mindset, then we can go into the stories. Because I don't know. Look, from everything I'm reading, World War III could happen could happen tomorrow. The Russians are pissed. Everyone's pissed. We could see a first strike against America in 10 minutes. Or we could be sitting here 6 months from now. I have no idea. What I do know is that the fight you're fighting for is for your soul and for your sanity and for your sovereignty. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. And as Pinelanders, we're going to give you every tool to get out. Good to see you, Tim. I also want to remind people, you didn't see it because I always do live shows, but today I did a non-live show. I called it the Pineland Pantry, with a bunch of practical little tips about how to save money when doing grocery shopping, for different ways to develop things, including two family recipes. The tomato soup recipe I shared is absolutely awesome, and if any of you try the ground lamb soup, or if you want any details, I'll include them for you. Really good recipes, absolutely scrumptious. So without further ado, let's get into this article here. And I wonder if, let me try something. I'm going to try to share it with you. I think I might be able to do this. So let's see. If I go home, I wonder if I can see my own thing while I'm watching. That's kind of creepy of me, but let's see if I can do it. I bet you I can, but I got to mute myself so you don't see me. Got it. Oh, here. Good. You can see me. All right. So this is the article here. I can do it this way. I've never done it before this way, but that's all right. Good to see you, Corey, as well. It's scary how the West keeps trying to sell us an idea Ukraine is winning the war. It makes me wonder what they have coming. And the reality is, I don't think Ukraine is winning the war. I think that I don't think that's what really even matters to them. I think it's just a distraction that they use, that is kind of stupid. And Zelensky, I think, is covering up a lot of bad things. From what I read, a lot of really nasty things are being trafficked to there. And why not? Soros had a great many years to work on that. So let me close this because I don't want to watch myself. Watching myself is too weird. I get too regressive. It's like a creepy mirror thing. Have you ever had that thing where you look into the mirror and you look into your eyes and you're like, who is this person? Anyway, all right. So I posted the link in there for you. So the Corbett Report. And this was by James Corbett, March 27th, 2022. We are in the middle of a world-changing war right now. Oh, I don't mean the war in Ukraine, the one that all the media are asking you to focus your attention on. Yes, that conflict continues to escalate, and every day there are new stories about provocations and threats that could lead to a nuclear exchange. But that's not the war I'm referring to. And no, I don't mean the war in Yemen or the other military conflicts the media are ignoring entirely. Yes, these wars are every bit as bloody, gruesome, and devastating as the Russian invasion of Ukraine, if not more so, and they also risk an escalation into a broader geopolitical and geoeconomic crisis. But they're not the wars I'm writing to or referring to either. No, the war I'm talking about is an even broader war. A war that is taking place everywhere on the globe, even as I write, and it involves virtually everyone on the planet, young and old, male and female, military and civilian. It is the war of every government against its own population and every institution internationally against free humanity. This is no ordinary war, however. Most of the victims of this warfare aren't even able to identify it as war, nor do they understand that they are combatants in it. It's called fifth generation warfare, and I'm here to tell you about it. What is fifth generation warfare? What is fifth generation warfare anyway? And come to think of it, what were the first four generations of warfare? Good questions. For an in-depth answer to the latter question, you'll want to read The Changing Face of War into the Fourth Generation, a 1989 article from the Marine Corps Gazette, co-authored by William S. Lind. By the way, I got to know Bill Lind a little bit. Smart guy. Victoria's a great book. He wrote it pseudonymously, but you would appreciate it. And you'll want to watch William Lind and Philip Giraldi, Fourth Generation Warfare in the Deep State, especially the presentation by Lind from 13 minutes onward. If you click their links, you can watch it. In a nutshell, Lind's thesis is that the modern age of warfare began with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, which Lind opines gave the state a monopoly on war. And from that point on, modern warfare went through three generations, namely. I will say, by the way, if you want to see the counterpoint of why things are falling apart, Martin Van Crevel, The Decline of the State, the guy Bill Lind actually recognizes, kind of a brilliant Israeli tactician. A lot of politically incorrect views, too. Not a big fan of women, but he certainly had some interesting books and a good understanding of warfare. So, first generation warfare, the tactics of line and column, developed in the era of the smoothbore musket. Second generation warfare, the tactics of indirect fire and mass movement, developed in the era of rifled musket, breech loaders, barbed wire, and the machine gun. Third generation warfare, which is basically blitzkrieg, the tactics of nonlinear movement, including maneuver and infiltration, developed in response to battlefield firepower in World War I. This, according to Lind and his co-authors, brought us to the late 20th century when the nation-state began to lose its monopoly on war and military combat returned to a decentralized form. So let me stop there and insert a little bit to that. So what happened was the state gave up the monopoly on violence. Think about how people had private security forces. And even if you study the Pentagon, what they did was, and the way they made wars popular post-Vietnam and the draft, is they just hired private military contractors. And nobody cared because they could make infinite money as long as kids weren't dying at home. We were willing to fight endless wars. And that's what ended up happening about the same time we went on to the petrodollar. So keep that in mind as we watch all these little, the side effect. We talk about USAID, we talk about Bellingcat, we talk about these CIA operations. But the other part of it was really the private military contractor forces as it went out there. And it was the reprofessionalization of mercenary armies, which, if you know the history, was what happened before the Treaty of Westphalia in the 30 Years' War, where you had Catholic monarchs and Protestant monarchs would hire Swiss mercenaries to go kill one another. And when they couldn't afford to pay because they ran out and they didn't win, they'd basically loot the land. And you might see a model come back like that. Let's hope not. The 30 Years' War is really ugly. But that's how it actually went. Worth studying. It's a topic that never gets covered. But in this era, continuing the article, the era of fourth generation warfare, the lines between civilian and military become blurred. Armies tend to engage in counterinsurgency operations rather than military battles, and enemies are often motivated by ideology and religion, making psychological operations more important than ever. And you can read things like Michael Aquino's book about how mind war and all these things. Of course, they let a whole bunch of Satanists come in there and do all these things. It's absolutely crazy. Good to see you, Ben. Glad you're here this evening. But Some argue we have now entered a new era of warfare, namely fifth generation warfare. And I actually coined this term myself 2 years ago. I talked about spiritual warfare that was all encompassing. So you see how much you think my definition fits his definition. Different people say it different ways, but the idea is it's direct control of the individuals being exercised by the state or the institutions that try to control things. It's the effort to throw puppet strings around you by controlling your entire environment. When you think of full spectrum dominance, that's like a military word they like to use. If you can control the inputs through the screens and control the financial things, you can really do a lot to control people. Now it's gotten to the point where they're basically looking at bionics, the insertion of technology and genetic manipulation. We saw this with the mRNA inserts, and you can actually, if you want to get a good feel for it, go watch like Anthony Fauci talking in like 2017, 2018 about where they wanted this to go, and think of where they took it. And remember, if we look at World War III, U.S. versus the East, Eurasia versus Oceania, China and the U.S. were both equally culpable in this whole agenda, which just shows you this that deeper level that pulls us all together. All right, so various scholars have made their own attempts at defining fifth generation warfare, like Dr. Wasim Ahmad Qureshi, who identifies it as the battle of perceptions and information, or Chao Long and Wang Shui of the People's Liberation Army. It's hard to do that. Right, of the era of unrestricted warfare, in which a relative reduction in military violence has led to an increase in political, economic, and technological violence. Put it a different way, countries realized it was much easier to fight battles not with direct militaries who could destroy the world, but by going after civilian populations. That's why you see woke culture warfare, being exercised as soft power by the West, where you see all this propaganda put out constantly, where you're not allowed to go against it. If, let's say, you go ahead and move forward, they change the narrative on you. We jump from COVID to Ukraine, and we might go back to COVID or whatever the next thing is, famine, and they play games. Like, one thing, this is a big warning I'm going to give all of you. Bird flu, because I said I was going to mention this. Like, right now, what they did was they're saying this horrible bird flu is going around everywhere. And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't, because they're running the PCR test so many cycles that literally it would be able to find Ebola the amount of times they're running it in chickens, even if they've never even been to Africa. And the point of it is that you create the appearance of a reality by something that seems pseudo-technical. It's a dogma. That's really what it is. And then you say, well, we have to kill all those birds. And why would you do that? Well, you have more people who are hungry, so that helps. You cover up the fact there's not enough food to be able to feed by removing them, and you create greater dependency, which is why you had, for instance, yesterday, the state of Minnesota said they're not going to allow the sale of poultry at animal shows. And what happens is, well, then you can't feed yourself. And I'll tell you, as someone who has chickens and who puts eggs there, these are things that could be very beneficial to you. But they're making these actions, and I could use 100 other examples to create this purposeful tension that always exists and never allows you independence, never allows you sovereignty, and always has you worried about the next big thing. Because when you're afraid, you give over power. And every one of these fears that they put on you, and that's what you have to learn to overcome your fear, is one more way by which you can be controlled. All right. So, if academic debates, continuing the article, about the changing nature of warfare are your thing, then there's plenty of reading for you to do on the subject, from the Handbook of 5GW, a fifth generation of war, and we'll call it that for short, to a slew of academic articles. But for the purposes of this editorial, I'm not interested in that debate, even though I've been in it, right? In fact, we're going to use a decidedly non-academic definition of fifth generation warfare from an Al Jazeera article as our starting point. The basic idea behind this term, 5GW, is that in the modern era, wars are not fought by armies or guerrillas, but in the minds of common citizens. There are two important things to note about this definition. The first is that fifth generation is not waged against either standing armies of nation states or guerrilla insurgents, but against everyday citizens. The second is that this war is not being fought in a battlefield somewhere, but in the mind. So we are here fighting as an insurgency force, as Pinelanders trying to remain sane human beings in a world where everyone is against us. The Americans are against us. The Canadians are against us. The Russians are against us. The Quebecois are against us. The Albertans are against us. Those people who live in Monson are against us. Little inside main joke. It's everyone is, because they are always being pulled out of this matrix, right? Let's see. They were just talking about fifth generation warfare, mental strategy in the chat. It seems like a good time to bring it up. Good to see you, by the way, and hello to everyone here. So I will expand, and this is Corbett saying, I will expand the definition somewhat to include that this war is being waged at all levels, not just the mental. The gist of it is this: fifth generation warfare is an all-out war that is being waged against all of us by our governments and by the international organizations to which they belong. It is being waged against each and every one of us right now, and it is a battle for full spectrum dominance over every single aspect of your life. And look at the creeping totalitarianism that we have been seeing in this, just to insert that. And remember, before all this broke down, what were they doing? They were trying to have AI where we had the cryptocurrency so you could see the data, and the Chinese had to have passports so they could see. And you're trying to feed that into this machine where they want to have this perfect predictive model. They're trying to build deep thought. If you've literally watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, asking the ultimate question, how can we control everything? And so when the answer comes back 42 in a syntax error, or maybe you have a scene like The Prisoner where you ask it why and the machine goes belly up, these are the sort of problems that we're literally having to deal with. And the people in charge who don't know what they're doing are looking to create a god in man's own image based on machines and whatever demonic tech that's involved in that. It's absolutely crazy here. Let's see. I run into one channel says we're winning Ukraine. Another one, where does the truth lie? Hey, not on the internet, right? But at least we could ask questions. JW says, long day. At least I get a Tomcast for the drive home. I'm glad I could help you out, brother. I mean, the numbers are great tonight, man. Maybe I'll have to start staying up. I hate staying up. You guys know that, but I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm glad that we have a great audience tonight. And thank you for being here, everyone who supports us, who is a loyal member. Whatever you do, prayers, financial support. Even if you're just here, we're glad to have you. Welcome. All right. So it is a battle for full spectrum dominance over every aspect of your life, your movements and interactions, your transactions, even your innermost thoughts and feelings and desires. That's what Google is. Remember, don't be evil. Collect all the information, the data you would send to a search engine, ask questions. You would never tell even to a confessor. You would, put out there, oh, well, it's just the machine. Nobody's there. Oh, yeah. Hi, NSA. Good to see you guys. Governments the world over are working with corporations to leverage technology to control you down to the genomic level, and they will not stop until each and every person who resists them is subdued or eliminated. This is what they're doing to us, and this is the real reality. And take it from me, I've been canceled. This is what happens. They come after you, and they come incessantly, and they have their little toadies and toadstools that just do it. And people are like, oh, I want to be part of the machine. I want to fit in. I want to fit in. It's like the world's worst, nastiest preschool. It's like the Little Shop of Horrors met Muppet Babies and decided to take over the world, and it's so insipid, and yet it is something we just cannot fight against very easily. But as Corbett says, the most incredible part of all of this is that so few know that the war is even taking place, let alone that they are a combatant in it. The best way to understand this war is to look at some of the ways it's being waged against us. So we're going to go into some of the different techniques and methods that are used here. I've got some people saying good evening to you, so. Well, actually, I'll go into that later. I don't want to do that publicly. All right, so stop me if you've heard this before, but this is an info war, and the powers that shouldn't be are engaged for your war, for your mind. They're telling the freaking bugs get. Okay, I'm not allowed to get so loud. Of course, you have heard of InfoWars if you've been in the alternative media space for any length of time, and for good reason. Information warfare is an absolutely essential part of the war on everyone that defines fifth generation warfare. Watchman's writing that Paul from Off Grid Desert Farming was showing how he's been dealing with EMP. He's been showing it, and it's absolutely, it's been terrible. Tim writes disorientation. Yeah, it is really bad. Little Shop of Horrors meets Muppet Babies, totally stealing that. You're welcome. I just asked that you give credit for, where infamy is due. Okay, so the most obvious way to understand this is to look at the actual military forces that are engaging in psychological operations against their own citizens. You'll remember, for instance, less than 2 years ago when the Canadian Armed Forces launched their brazen fake wolves psyop on the Canadian public, declaring that the scandemic presented them with a unique opportunity to test propaganda techniques on Canadians. Or you might recall a decade ago when the U.S. Army deployed an information operations unit against the U.S. Senate to manipulate visiting American senators into providing more troops and funding for the war. And look, this is it. Everyone's trying to propagandize everyone. Everyone's lying. And the thing is, information has become the most valuable currency, much more so than money or any of these other things, because you can kind of make that up out of thin air. Didn't Bitcoin prove that? Or out of thin energy? There's other coins that are a little less valuable, or you can do Tether. Say you have $100 in account, it's like fractional reserve crypto, right? But what we are seeing is that this is now being applied to you constantly, to the point where if you feel like you're disconnected from reality and you can't hold on to it, you're not alone. We are all going through this because, as he says, it's not just out and out military operations by soldiers dressed up in camo fatigues that are part of 5GW. In the war on everyone, the establishment uses every means at its disposal to manipulate the public's perception. And that's what we're seeing in Ukraine, in my opinion. We're seeing soft war against hard war. And we'll see. In reality, Russia's doing fine. In Fantasyland, Ukraine is the champions of the world. And the funny thing is, what's actually going to win? Will unreality, with all of its potential, defeat reality? And like something will happen on the ground, but it'll be so disconnected. And maybe Ukraine won't win, and maybe Russia won't lose. But you know what? Finland and Sweden are joining NATO, it looks like. All of Europe is disconnecting, and America's keeping its vassals. And so we are going to have this weird empire of woke cancel surrealism. It doesn't even have the cool style of a Dali or a Picasso. It just has blatant, things against whatever this model that the East is putting forward. They say it's hard power, but it's really just a rehash of communism. And it's the truth of it. It makes me sad. I want to be a Slavophile. I actually kind of want to support the Russians a little bit, but they're not running around supporting orthodoxy. They're supporting every third bit, 2-bit actor who's just looking for self-interest, and that's fine. But the idea is, what are we fighting for in control? Because China's using these same techniques. Maybe Russia isn't, but you're going to see this become more and more popular. It's grippy. You can't get away from it. And technology pulls you in. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk on this channel, call it a spiritual battle, pulling yourself out of the systems that control you. But everyone looking for the perfect system, even as systems fighting one another, just like the Cold War made two security states, is doing this. And every justification of every provocation just makes it more and more all-encompassing. And so we're rushing for the exits. But just listen further about some of the problems we're dealing with. So he continues, Corbett does, thus, Richard Stengel, former editor of Time, who bestowed Time's Person of the Dishonor on you on back in 2006, is happy to chair a Council on Foreign Relations conversation in which he defends the use of the U.S. government's use of propaganda against its own citizens. And for those of you who don't know the term, look up the Smith-Mundt Act, and Obama got rid of that. Or Hill and Knowlton, the PR firm hired by the Kuwaiti government to create the Nayiriyah's deception in the first Gulf Wars, retained by the World Health Organization in 2020 to identify celebrity influencers who could be used to amplify the scandemic messaging. And we've seen this, by the way. Trust me, COVID's real enough. I'm still fighting to get the mud out of my lungs. But the idea of that, that they are now just not putting data out there that doesn't fit their narrative, I mean, it's whatever lie most people want to go with. And that's what we've ended up with, hordes of people chasing their lies. Or the UK government's scientific pandemic influenza group on behaviors outright admits they use psychological techniques to manipulate the government interfering in the scandemic, a move that some of the panel members called totalitarian, and no one bats an eyelid. And they always think, well, the ends justify the means, but what are the ends? The ends are we live in complete fear of our own shadow, and that's kind of the point. We are creating a digital panopticon, as I said over on the Twitter account. Perhaps the most insidious part of the fifth generation InfoWar is that it has become so normalized that everyone knows it is happening and no one thinks of it as warfare. Of course, everything is advertising and propaganda, and of course, it's being used to manipulate our behavior. That's just how the world works, isn't it? But we ignore the real nature of the InfoWar at our own peril. After all, I have often observed that this is a war for your mind, and the most contested battle space in the world is the space between your ears. You might have thought I meant that metaphorically, but I also mean that quite literally, which brings us to, and this is where it gets interesting, neurological warfare. Yeah, Hill and Knowlton are the nexus point. I mean, in some of these names, you don't know. You're not supposed to know them, but you could find them. They're not that secretive. They just, no one bothers to know it. So it says NeuroST for NSID, assess access target. And it talks about the techniques they will use. Assessment techniques, neuroimaging, neurophysiological recording, neurogenomics and genetics, neuroproteomics, neurocyber-informatics, and interventional techniques, cyber-linked neurocog manipulation, novel pharmaceuticals, neuromicrobiologicals, organic neurotoxins, and neurotechnologicals. So basically, they're turning your brain into a play space for what is the connection to the social media, the links, and all of this is mediated, most of it through your optic nerve. In the first level where you're learning and you're looking from screens and you're constantly looking, and then you have these neurotransmitter triggers. And believe me, take it from someone. I'm like, right now I have to take a steroid for healing my lungs, and I'll tell you, all I want to do is eat. I can be as full, I can be overflowing, and like, even though, because because I know I'm taking certain medicines. I just want to keep eating more and more to the point where, I will glut myself. It's terrible. And but what you begin to realize is your instruction code isn't always connected to what the actual outputs are. And as you look at how this evolves, you realize that they're constantly hacking that code to the point where you don't want things, where you have things you don't want that you keep grabbing. You're like, why do I keep grabbing more? Why do I keep grabbing more? And then you're like, all right, I'm going to look away from the screen. I'm not going to worry about money. And then you're like, oh, I can't. The bills are coming. I better look at the screen. Look at the screen. Panic, 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 panic. And look, I'm as guilty as anyone. I come out here and I scare the crap out of you. But the thing that I'm trying to scare the crap out of you is to say you have to be so scared that you finally say, enough, I'm done with it. And then hopefully we all build Pineland and we never look at a screen again. We could just have break phones day. Wouldn't that be great to just have a day where you find a whole bunch of old cell phones and just crack them? I would love that. Irony of ironies. But here I am talking to you because that's what we have to do. That's how we connect. This is the world. And it's no accident. That word was made. Remember, the internet was not plucky, fun people, hanging out as hippies in California. It was heavy funding by the Advanced Research Projects Agency, eventually DARPA, as it evolves into. And you can read these articles from the 60s and 70s where they were talking about memes and psychoanalysis of what technology would allow. So these were no accidents. This was something that was globally put together. But let's continue to add some detail to it for context. If you listen to Dr. James Giordano speak without listening to what he's saying, you get the impression he's merely an articulate, well-informed scientist who is passionate about his research. When you do listen to what he's saying, however, or even just look at his PowerPoint slides, like NeuroST for NSID slide above, you realize he is Dr. Strangelove. And look, I love Kubrick, but God knows, let's go to the moon. Let's not do this, right? Yeah. Or if not Dr. Strangelove himself, then at least Dr. Strangelove's spokesman. But it's not nuclear Armageddon that motivates Giordano. It's what he calls weapons of mass disruption, the various technologies for neurological intervention that the U.S. military and militaries around the world are developing. So when you read about those Ukraine labs, I'm sure they exist. Whether they're in Ukraine or not, these things are moving forward all the time. Hi, Fort Meade. Good to see you're working at that. AMRAD, nice to see you. I'm sure Dugway's working on it too. And there are other ones, Tavistock. Every country has these. And they're like, well, we have to have them because everyone else is going to have them. Great. So we're all going to go and turn ourselves into what, clumps? These include, in Giordano's well-rehearsed pattern, the drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices that could either enhance or disrupt the cognitive functions of their target, like the high CNS, that's central nervous system, aggregation nanoparticulates that, according to Giordano, clump in the brain or in the vasculature, that's the blood, and create essentially what looks like hemorrhagic diathesis. That's a big fancy word for having blood block through your brain. As sci-fi as this sounds, he insists these nanoparticulates and many, many other horrific neurological weapons are already being worked on. They're not just being worked on, they've been made. You guys see the evidence. Look at things like Dazak and Strock we're working on. In fact, this is one of the things that has been entertained and examined to some extent by my colleagues in NATO and by those who are working on the worst use of neurobiological sciences to create populational disruption. They're very, very worried about the potential of these nanoparticulate agents to be CNS aggregating agents to cause neural disruption, either as hemorrhagic or vascular disruptors, and as actual neural network disruptors because they interfere with the network properties of various neural nodes and systems within the brain. So when we start seeing people become cretins and gorks, where their brains are fried out because the miscalibration of the neurotransmitters, and if those of you who've studied graphene, all this stuff's already out there. The self-creating machines with the internal codes that can hack cells. All of this was covered. Stu Peters did a really good job on some of that. If you want to go watch Dr. Jane Ruby, all those people, they put the details out there, and that information's there. People are like, oh, well, I wouldn't believe that. They'd never do anything like that. Whatever would hurt them. Well, that idiot in the movie always has the reset button. It's like, was it like the Kingsman, like Valentine, like that sort of a character. But continuing, and just in case you didn't get the point, you'll notice he illustrates a slide with an image of a human brain in the crosshairs of one of these neurological weapons. There's nothing hard to understand about the picture that is being painted here. We are at war with an enemy who is literally targeting our brains. And if you want my opinion, I'll just add a little bit more to that. Technology is literally creating a soul trap. We're trying to separate our biology from our ability to access something bigger. You study someone like Rupert Sheldrake, right? And you look at it from a divine perspective, maybe. You start to understand that we do access a cloud, we do access consciousness, we access higher levels through the Holy Spirit. And all this is being separate from us because man is being made into a machine so he can exist purely in this physical space, be controlled, manipulated, and managed at every step, to the point where we don't even have our own biology. And it's only for the gift of faith that we're going to be able to resist this, because you and I, by conventional means, have no ability to stop this. It's not if we want it to happen, it's not if we want to resist it. This is happening, and we need weapons that are beyond our comprehension to fight this, which is why you better start getting spiritual. But I'm telling you that because you need to know this is the reality of the world you live in. These are not things that are 10 years distant, 20 years distant. This is right now. And people are just fighting over who's going to control it, or who thinks they're going to control it, who even knows what's actually going to control it. I mean, you start messing with things like this, you're inviting higher realms to come down. It won't be long before someone comes down from the fourth dimension to say, hey, wait a second, you guys have really screwed this up. But yet again, it isn't just the literal use of neurological weapons by conventional militaries and conventional warfare settings that we, the largely unwitting combatants of the fifth generation warfare, and everyone have to worry about. As my listeners already know, avowed technocrat Elon Musk, by the way, he just bought 10% of Twitter, interesting, is trying to sell his Neuralink brain chip technology to the hipster crowd as a cool and sexy way to upgrade your cognition, or so that the so-called, so that the coming AI godhead will have mercy on us, or something like that. Anyway, you should totally stick the Neuralink in your head at the earliest possible opportunity, and definitely don't ask any questions about why 15 of the 23 macaque monkeys that Neuralink was using as test animals in their brain-machine interface in an experiment have dropped dead. This is the reality of it. To anyone not yet a victim of the information warfare operations designed to prepare humanity for the coming transhuman dystopia, all of this sounds insane. But those who have fallen for the InfoWars psyop of the enemy, these types of mind-altering technologies are exactly as advertised, exciting opportunities to upgrade the feeble biological wetware we call our brain. But if you think you can avoid the biological aspect of fifth generation warfare by simply avoiding a brain chip, you're out of luck. You're also going to have to deal with biological warfare. Okay, and a lot of you know about biowarfare at this point. I mean, you've been following COVID, you know mRNA changes. I mean, realistically, you're recoding. And here's the good news and here's the bad news, based on what I've researched, and you can agree or disagree. The good news is your DNA is basically just encoding protein instructions. That's the good news. So even if they mess with it a little bit, you can encode the wrong proteins, like the spike protein, and you can cause a lot of damage, and you can wreck the immune system. But you can't really change the nature of the being unless you start corrupting the code to the point where the proteins that are being managed are not able to, create the higher consciousness functions, because it seems increasingly obvious consciousness exists as a field outside of the standard understanding of physics, because it exists in quantum entanglement, it exists in all time and places, and it's something greater than us. It's something that we come into, we access. So that's the good news. The bad news is most people don't know that, and they're going to go ahead and try to cheat that to make themselves better, and maybe they'll succeed in little ways, but they'll turn themselves into as a perfect machine, a form of de-evolution that fits an environment at the cost of giving up greater capacity. Okay, let's continue. The biowarfare narrative is understandably back at the forefront of the public consciousness in recent years, not just because of the scamdemic, but also because of the questions being raised about the US-backed Ukrainian biolabs and whatever work they may or may not be doing on Russia's doorstep. The picture above, for example, and just so you know, you see three people sitting there one guy's wearing a camo mask while wearing a white outfit and doing some work on some, I don't know, he's holding something that looks like some sort of pipette. Um, anyway, the picture above, for example, comes from straight from Army.mil, which was only too happy to brag as recently as last July that U.S. soldiers were conducting hands-on training and field training exercises with Ukrainian troops in laboratory and field environments that included ensuring the readiness of deployable mobile laboratories. That sounds creepy, right? Nothing to see here, folks. Perhaps the only surprising thing about the article is they haven't scrubbed it from their website yet, although a lot of these did get scrubbed, actually. But once again, if we are only thinking of biowarfare in conventional military terms, we would neglect the much, much wider operation to manipulate, control, and weaponize all aspects of our environment, our food supply, and even our genome itself for the purposes of the ruling oligarchs. This fifth generation biological warfare being waged against us includes 1. The mRNA and DNA and genetically modified adenovirus vector vaccines that have been normalized over the past 2 years, in which, as the miraculously lucky companies that betted it all on this technology. Oh, by the way, did you find Moderna's exact code was in COVID? Kind of interesting how that worked out. I'm not supposed to say that. Anyway, but they betted us all on this technology, like to brag, is reprogramming the software of life. And then they all went private, so they couldn't take the things away from them. The genetically modified organisms, both GMO crops and GMO animals, that are now being unleashed upon the world in an uncontrolled experiment that puts our health and the very future of the biosphere in jeopardy. The push toward synthetic lab based food, eat your crickets, right? That is being funded by the usual eugenicist billionaires and which threatens to sever humanity from the natural abundance of the earth, make us dependent on an increasingly shrinking number of companies for our food supply, and ultimately to drive us toward a Soylent Green style future. It's like Monsanto, right? This is what we're dealing with. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks with myriad other examples of the attacks upon the world's air, water, and biome that constitute this unconstrained fifth generation biological war being waged against us. When and if you do put the pieces of this puzzle together and seek to warn people en masse that they are under attack, your ability to resist this agenda will be predicated on your ability to use your accumulated resources, your wealth, to foster communities of resistance. Go Pineland. But don't worry, though, the enemy has that domain covered too. Economic warfare. This is where we get into the impoverishment. And let's take a little break here to remind you, for your humble narrator here, if any of you want to support us, super chats are welcome. The Venmo, CVC, PRV, go buy the books, right? It helps. That's why I get to do stuff like this, because let me tell you something, the algorithm is not my friend. Although, you know what, if you guys like the evening programs, I'll try to do at least 1 or 2 a week, just to reach out to different people. It's just easier for me in the morning, but not while I'm writing. All right, so let's continue. Given the events of recent weeks, even the sleepiest of the sleepy now realize we are in a period of economic warfare. Oh, bye-bye petrodollar, right? This war, too, has its conventional aspects. On the 2D board, we've seen the NATO empire launch its weapons of financial destruction at Russia in recent weeks, and exactly as predicted, it has resulted in the consolidation of a convenient geopolitical boogeyman bloc and a gigantic loss of faith in the international monetary system itself. And also, as predicted, it has supplied the problem and reaction. Sounds familiar, right? Needed for the technocrats to present their predetermined solution of central bank digital currencies. Just ask Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. By the way, I got to tell Larry Fink for a second. This guy's going out there. People haven't understood suffering. I don't want a billionaire lecturing me about suffering. You want to have suffering? Go grow your own food out of the ground for 1 minute and try to survive off that. But this is what these people do. They don't believe it. It's got a perfect name, too. Where do they find these people? Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink. It's like a bad writing, It's like, honestly, do you ever feel like you're like in a bad high school musical? That's what it feels like to me sometimes. So bad. The war will prompt countries to reevaluate their currency dependencies. Even before the war, several governments were looking to play a more active role in digital currencies and define the regulatory frameworks under which they operate. Derp, what I should do is I should do like a musical of this. Would you guys like that? We're here to save the world, one venture fund at a time. Silicon Valley will help us. We're gonna stop pre-crime. So bad. I know, it's terrible. I honestly, I think I need a little substance to deal with this. This is not merely a battle between nation states or even competing power blocks. This is a battle being waged by every authoritarian power structure. And by the way, some of them are not governments, some of them are corporations, some of them are individuals. Everyone thinks they can do it. Bezos is out there playing the game. Gates was playing the game with Gavi. Musk, who knows? I mean, we might end up just having one person. And every government, because that's what the Antichrist is, and there's a lot of spirit of that running around. But by every authoritarian power in every government, but I repeat myself, against their own citizens for control of the most important resource of all, their wallets. Yes, we are seeing the beginning of a truly world historic moment, the collapse of the Pax Americana, the death of the dollar reserve system, the beginning of an entirely new monetary paradigm. The CBDC system of programmable money that will be able to algorithmically control when, how, and if you're allowed to transact in the economy at all. We only have to look to recent events in Canada to understand what this will look like. This perfect control of humanity down to the level of being able to witness and ultimately allow or disallow any transaction between any individuals at any time represents the apotheosis of technocracy, which is the fulfillment, and one of the key objectives of the fifth generation warfare itself. As this nightmare becomes closer and closer to reality, all seems hopeless. But then again, that's exactly the point. And then it goes into the real war. That's what we're going to talk about. And I want you to understand this is it. You're dealing with complete war against you. And that every one of these things that, if we don't come out of this and come to mutual self defense in a belief in something bigger that we ask for, because we're going to need help. I mean, it's beyond the ability to just say, oh, we're going to go build a little community. I mean, we're going to need some miracles. I mean, you better get ready to pray regularly for that. This is what we're fighting. And this is why it's so hard to fight. I can tell you every problem out there, but there's always going to be another one. And how do we resist this? Thank you, Patrick. I'm trying to recover. I have good moments and bad moments. When I'm talking a lot, it's easier because my breath is shallow. When I breathe deeply, I'd hack my face off. So we're not going to do that during this program. But when I get off the air, I'll probably pay for doing this tonight. But that's okay. It is a pleasure to spend time with all of you, and hopefully you're enjoying this evening. So if you haven't hit the like, please hit like, and certainly welcome people to subscribe. Please share the content. Also, we want to try to grow the channel a little bit. And if you do more, I'll do more, and it's a virtuous cycle. And if you have content you want to share, by the way, let me know. I'd be happy to share some of your content as too. We invest in our community. It's important to us. So Corbett continues, I could go on and on and on and on, and he has links to different things that are about this, but hopefully you get the point by now. There is a world war happening right now. It's a fifth generation war, or whatever you want to call it. It's being waged against every domain simultaneously. It is a war for full spectrum dominance of every battlefield and every terrain, from the farthest reaches of the globe and beyond to the inner spaces of your body and even to your innermost thoughts. And it is a war on you. Recognizing this, the task we face seems nearly insurmountable. How are we to fight back in a war that the majority of people don't even recognize is taking place? My answer to that: accept that they're lost and try to save the people who you can reach. How do we fight back against an enemy that has spent decades refining its weapons of economic and military, technological, and biological control? How do we fight back in a war that's not taking place on two fronts or even three fronts, but in every domain and battle space simultaneously? How you do it? You're fighting everything at the same time. And the answer is you have to begin seeking it out. Framed like this, our prospects do appear hopeless, but therein lies the key. Our perception that it is our duty to fight back against the enemy in their war, on their battlefield, on their terms of engagement, is itself a narrative frame. And that narrative itself is a weapon that is being wielded against us in the battle for our minds. You'll allow me space here to quote myself at length because this is a point I've made many times before, perhaps most notably in my conversation on the anatomy of the New World Order that I had with Julie and Charles on the Mind Renewed podcast 9 years ago. And then he goes into a lengthy thing talking about a way we can begin fighting back, which I agree with largely, even though the details are, of course, important. I'm intrigued by the idea we've been given false templates to follow in terms of solving our problems. One being to fight our enemies' templates provided for us, and that's problem, reaction, solution. That's Hegel. Really, it's the Garden of Eden. It's the tree of good and evil, right? Templates, because we don't know. God's only one smart enough, which is why we have to ask him for help. But templates, good to see you, SS. Glad you're here. Templates provided for us through so much social conditioning and the media. Here, the idea is that we must find the heart or the head of the organization, somehow kill that person or that group or whatever it is, eliminate that, and everything will magically turn to the better. It's that we always want to be the good guys fighting the bad guys. We're the bad guys, right? Thinking in broad terms, that false template appears in virtually every science fiction dystopia you've ever seen. If it turns out well in the end, it's only because they have managed to decapitate the head of the beast, whether it be Lord of the Rings or Tron or any such movie. I think that's fundamentally and completely the wrong way to look at it, because at the end of the day, the particular individuals who may or may not be holding the ring of power are replaceable. Indeed, there are very many people who would be chomping at the bit to get into that position of power should the old guard be swept away for whatever reason. It's true. Sauron replaced, what was his name? Melchior, I think was his name, if I remember. It's been a minute. Oh, good to see you. Well, thank you for saying hi to me and Dana. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I guess that's a little, well, I guess you're in West Coast time. Okay, that's fine. But good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. I think what's needed is a more fundamental revolution, not the overthrowing of a specific instantiation of this idea, but an overthrowing of the idea altogether. And this is what I wrote in Coming Out of Babylon. And that can only come, I think, from building up an alternative system to which people actually want to apply themselves. We have to be running to something. We have to be living by better means. I think we have to detach ourselves from the system we've been woven into. Unfortunately, that's probably as difficult to do as that analogy would make it sound, because we are so woven into the fabric of society that it's difficult to imagine extricating ourselves from all these processes. We rely for so many of our daily needs on this vast, unwieldy corporate system that ties into these very organizations that pull the strings of governmental institutions that it can seem quite overwhelming. How can a single individual affect this? Well, you come on here and bitch on the internet like I do, right? And we can all do that. We can all tell people, hey, is this system bad? Why do we give our consent to it? Because that's what you got to begin pulling out. You got to begin just pulling yourself out of it and say, this is controlling me. This is controlling me. And look, you're like Frodo in the spider web. Old Shelob's trying to get a piece of you. Well, rip those webs around you. I think we need to look for any and every possible point at which we can start to detach ourselves from those systems of control and start to reassert some kind of independence. It can be an extremely small thing, like just for example, instead of buying groceries at the grocery store, perhaps buy them at a farmer's market, or at least some of your groceries. Or perhaps you could grow them yourself in a vegetable garden. Something of that sort is a tiny thing on the individual level, but I think it's the only thing in the long run that can lead to the type of society we want to bring to fruition. Again, I think it's small things like that. If we start to apply ourselves with diligence and perseverance, that will, you know what, books would be great, Crumb. I mean, if you have your books, you know what, you're not looking at a screen. Books require creativity. If you just got rid of the screens, you would do so much good. But just my own personal pet peeve. It's why I don't put a lot into the visuals. That usually I can, but you guys just want to listen to the thoughts, and that's why I want you thinking. You shouldn't be paying attention to me. Lord knows my gnarly beard is nothing good for anything short of a Radagast tryout. Anyway, let's see, where was I? Again, it's small things like that. If we start to apply ourselves with diligence and perseverance, then we'll eventually be able to overthrow this. But unfortunately, as I say, we are on the cusp of this scientific revolution. I mean, really, we're under technological totalitarianism. This was 9 years ago, which makes scientific dictatorship possible. So unfortunately, we don't necessarily have generations of time, which gives a time perspective to all this. I won't say it's a time bomb, but you get the idea. We don't have a lot of time to waste. And by the way, we did waste it. We have a choice. Either we continue going into this technological corporate matrix, which involves things like buying the next generation of iPhone, which they're already saying is going to have its own fingerprint scanning technology. That happened. And all of these corporate military Big Brother elements to it that we are willingly sign up for every day of our lives. Because think of all the things you get for free that are using you as the product. You understand that. That's how it always goes. Where were we? So all these elements we're signing up for every day of our lives and actually paying money for, or we start to create alternative structures to which don't rely on that system. It's a choice we have to make in our lives, and I would say more quickly than has been apparent at any other time in human history. And let me insert my own commentary for 1 second here. Um, I think we have this summer to do it, and I think we're very close to having the control grid fully in place. The infrastructure was laid in. A lot of the money for COVID, you could see it. Look at how the Canadians were treated during the convoy. And this war will be used as justification. The misery that exists will say we need a perfect system where everything needs to be controlled so people can't fight one another. And what will happen is it will be the death of the species if that's allowed to happen. And there will be resistance. I mean, and I would also add, Corbett doesn't go there because everyone wants to be smart and secular, but I am not smart and secular. I am dumb and I know my own limitations. So I pray a lot. I ask for faith to step in and cover the gaps. Say, Lord, protect us and hide us from these things, because we are going into a season of wickedness where if we rely on our own strength, we will fail, and we will have to learn to rely on one another. And I say that because if you can tell me a solution to fighting this, I welcome it. I will give you my channel, put that out there, and then we could certainly say good things we can do to separate ourselves. But to defeat this, that's beyond us. To survive this, we need help. But to be honest about what it is and to help others come out, that's the work that's out there. And that's the chance to help people preserve their souls and their sanity and their sovereignty. I like that three S's. It's super. All right. So my regular readers will understand what I'm proposing here, writes Corbett, the creation of a parallel society. We will not achieve this by asking for more scraps from the master's table or by gently complying as we are herded into ever more constrictive technological pens or by thinking we can win this war by engaging the enemy in their controlled domain. We can only achieve this by creating our own table, our own... David, by the way, thank you, by the way. I got your lovely letter and congratulations. I'm glad you haven't been around as much. So I'll leave it at that. But or by thinking we can this or by we can only achieve this by creating our own table, our own economy, and our own communities of interest. This will require the long and difficult task of increasing our independence from the authoritarian systems in every domain: information domain, food domain, health domain, monetary domain, mental domain, and every other contested battle space in this all-out fifth generation war. And one of the biggest things I can say to you is remember, money's fake. It's all fake. I can like lay it out if you need to, but most of you should understand. If you don't, I can point you to certain books, or we can talk about it. But believe me, it's fake. We're just giving everything for it. Now, I hope it's working well. She's a lucky lady. Easier said than done, of course, but there is no alternative. Some will say, but won't they come after that parallel society, as if that is a rebuttal to what I've laid out here? The point is, you are already the target of the enemy in a war that most people but dimly understand is happening. Yes, the enemy will come after you. They're already coming after you. So they went after me and Jackman. I mean, who gives a damn? Can you find Jackman on a map? I couldn't. But they are already dominating you in more ways than any one person can fully understand, and that does not just stop because you comply with their demands or take part in their system. We must stop playing their game. We must stop fighting their war. We must stop ceding our power, our authority, our time, our attention, our energy, and our resources to engaging the enemy in their terms on their battlefield. We must create our own parallel society on our own terms, and I would say whatever it takes is what we have to do. I'm fine with that. Yeah, got to give it a go. We just rediscover an old piece of wisdom. To paraphrase, fifth generation warfare. Wait, fifth generation warfare is a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. War is over if we want it. I'm trying to paraphrase Joshua from War Games, which is where he grabbed that from. But that was the piece that James Corbett wrote, and I wanted to share with you this evening. Actually, I want to share with you this morning, but that's fine. We need to begin finding our way out of those battles. And what does it require? It requires us to collectivize our efforts. And look, we're not good at that. We like being individuals. One of the reasons the system works so well is it presents, in my opinion, a whole lot of choices. It gives you 100 false choices. Some are better than others. None are completely true. Every one of them makes you give something up. And we fight over, well, I've only given up 10% of what I believe in. Well, I've given up 20%. But you keep doing it. And just like annual percentage rate interest, the usurious imposition upon your soul ends up getting you caught deeper and deeper and deeper into the system because you're never really fighting for what's true. You're fighting for whatever choice they give you of the lesser of two evils. And eventually we get to the point where we decide the lesser of two evils is to say there is no evil and there is no good, there's only aesthetic, and that we exist at that level and accept all the systems there. Giving up ground is giving up ground. And instead of giving up ground, we have to stand our ground. And we have to be willing to put our backs to one another, head for the high ground while the flood's coming up at us, and shoot down at them and let them chase after us. I mean, that's the victory. That's what the men we need to be. See, you're writing. They demand that we compromise, and they never compromise. No, they never do, and they never. They will never let you say anything's true. You want to know how you're over the target? Say things that are true. See the flag you take, and what happens is they sick everyone against you because you know what the thing is. The reason why this works, it's real cynical, but it's true, is they mobilize people against people who speak truth because they don't want to have to deal with the moral anguish that comes from the sellout that they gave of themselves. And every one of us has been a sellout in our lives. Look, I've worked in corporate offices for years. I worked for a defense contractor. Right? I was a logistics specialist and a procurement specialist. So I know all the ugliness. And I worked in the courts for years. Everyone is constantly selling out, and they're doing it because they say, "Oh, I have to do it for money. I have to do it because it's expected. I have to do it because it's the right thing." And we know it's wrong, and we make these trade-offs. And you know what? Even and we say, or even like I'll be honest, even when it comes to violence, at some point you say, at some point, you know what? If things don't work out better than that, I'm willing to sit with 20 men on a hill and say, "This is our place. You can come take it. I don't accept your system anymore." Shoot, missed a bunch, but good to see you, farm girl. I didn't sell out. I bought it. Yeah, that's fine. That's very honest, Eki. I appreciate that, and certainly, yeah, that's just as valid a way of saying it. And we need to begin working our way out of this mentally. We don't have a lot of time, and our ability to survive survival can't be a one-person game or one family game. Like I was writing about this in my book today, because I was writing, what was the chapter about? It was about talking how you build your tribe. And the biggest problem people have in building your tribe is your tribe starts out with your family. And if you have a family of five, usually you have one person who gets it, three people who really don't, and one who might be persuadable, and you get dragged along. And so we are having to redevelop ourselves, rebuild our clans, rebuild our tribes, rebuild our kin of the same people who want to survive, who say, wait a minute, we're driving the ark into an iceberg. Is this a good idea? They're like, why are you complaining? You're always so negative. Don't you just trust the captain? He got us this far. He didn't really get us this far. The current got us this far. The guy's drunk at the wheel, and we're supposed to go along with this? I don't think so. For me, I'm looking for ways out. And what Corbett is saying here in terms of little victories, absolutely, totally support that. But we're further along. 9 years have happened since some of those things. I still have a lot of deck chairs to move. And well, I'm sure you'll do the waltz, absolutely. Kate Winslet's waiting for you, no doubt about it. But what we're going to see is we are going to have to get out in a bigger way. And you know what? In this community, I genuinely believe this, and the people know who they are. There are people who have the resources to make these things happen. There are people who have the technological ability to keep us apart in a way where we might be able to resist, and we need to work quickly at this. And whatever that means for you might be a different thing. You don't have to follow Tom exactly. And thank you, Farm Girl, for that. That's very kind. I appreciate that, and thank you for your support. And for everyone who's hanging in here, amen. I understand that too. So these are the battles that we are now going to have to start fighting. And as I was saying, the problem that I've identified that I'm writing about for your benefit is how you get around those questions of your family. And one of the things that came to me while I was writing today, because I never really know exactly what I'm going to write till I do it, is that you need to be building to something. You need to have a vision of it. In Pineland, we've described this as faith, folk, and family. And people always say, why do you put folk before family? Because if you want to keep your family together, you have to have a society they want to participate in. If you have something where everything is misery and drudgery, and there's no joy, and there's no entertainment, and there's no bigger motivating purpose, that's why faith becomes first. Something that's bigger than life to fight for. Folk, a group of people who are going to stand together, then a family can exist. Because if it's just you and your loved one trying to drudge your way through, a pile of manure while you're in planting season, some people will survive that. Most people will not. And people who have been high agency people in the system will feel an incredible effort to come back. And that's what you have to do. You have to build not just an alternative society, but want the alternative. You have to believe in it. You have to let it become who you are, and to re-identify yourself as someone else existing outside that system. So I'm going to be writing about that, and tomorrow I'm going to be writing about human geography, where you get to it. In my own belief, you have to get out. You have to get away from people. You have to get away from technology. You have to get to the point where your interactions are slower, because our brains cannot keep up with the pacing of the attacks against us. It's just impossible to do anything but be in rugged defense. And you can do that for a season. We all can do that. But if we keep doing that, it's going to break us down. It breaks me down. Like I honestly, I'm sitting here, and I have supplies to survive and a plan for different things. But I look at him like, oh God, I can't do any more work. Just take me home, Father. And that's not good. But I know a lot of people are in that same boat. We all have this struggle that we have to overcome. And figuring out a way to connect to one another is the effort, and sharing ideas, and sharing, hopefully, proximity. I've made a lot of trade-offs to come to where I am. And who knows if this will be the place we eventually completely land up, but it at least has been a start. And I will say something. It's funny. I was sharing with the community earlier today, over in the Telegram group. Some people spend, it seems like, 3 to 5 times the amount of money to achieve the same things we do, because we reoriented our life around different principles. And one of the biggest ones is control over time. The one thing that I genuinely thought and hoped COVID would be helpful with is they would help people reorient their time usage in a way where they valued things more in life. And it turned out we hate being still. We literally cannot stand it. We are always looking for new stimulation. And I think until we rediscover stillness, we're really going to struggle. But that's what they count on. And that's something that has been engineered, a low level neurotic anxiety. I mean, it's something I experienced when people come up and visit us where we lived in New Hampshire or Maine. We'd have friends come down from the city, and they were perfectly nice people, but you could see they were always on edge. They were waiting for someone to rob them. They were locking this and all that. And I understand preparedness and being aware of your environment. I'm not speaking against that. But I mean, if you get to a point where you have to live like a caged animal, Well, what do you expect you're going to have but trauma responses? And that's the worst thing about this whole system. It is constant trauma management at the neurological level, at the psychological level, the biological level, the economic level, and trauma's coming. I mean, if I click refresh, right? I'm just gonna look what horrible things we have here. Let's just look for 1 second. If I look at one of my favorite conspiracy sites, that don't come. It's forbidden. All right, what do we got? Let's see, children being raped, great. No more medicine, great. What else we got? Male birth control, lovely. South and North Korea about to go to war. Poland shutting down its border. Um, Transgender cyclists booted from women's championships after female competitors. And we say that's healthy, by the way. At some point, you make a choice. You live for the world, or you use the world to live for something else. This is the choice we face now. And if you choose not to live for the world, you're probably going to have problems. You might run out of money at some point. You might run out of a resource. You might even die. But you'll be sane. You'll be human. You might be afraid of things, but you'll understand why you're doing it. And I think that we've reached the point where people don't know what they're doing anymore. They don't know why they're doing it. We're waiting for the next thing to happen to us, and we're trusting that maybe that'll take down this whole system. But maybe the system is like a perpetual funnel whose job is just to take each and every one of us down by lulling us to sleep. A siren song that is the end of humanity, where we just wait and watch and fail. And, I did a sermon on Sunday, and I don't know if I mentioned this. I think it was in the book of Proverbs, but I don't want to swear by it. But it was definitely from Solomon. And he was saying that, no, it was Ecclesiastes. And he said, it's better to do than dream. And I like to dream. I like to write books. I want to write fiction. I'm going to get back to it. But the thing about it is, we're sitting here waiting and hoping for a world that's not going to come, instead of making an effort to get out there and build a world that at least we can survive in. Because even if we got what, 22 people in here right now, if I believe this, and historically I've noticed it reduces it by about two out of a third of what it actually is based on certain facts I can actually check. Let's say we had 50 people. If 50 people like us were living together and having a night together and just talking and being in a hall, and how much better would our lives be? I mean, do you have something you love so much you want to keep? Do you love your job? Do you love your work? You love your land? At some point, we got to figure a way to put this together. And I don't know how to do it. I'm not saying that I have the answers. I mean, I work at the answers, but the Lord has the answers. He'll guide us. He says, in the book that we'll have to go to the wilderness, and that's where we're going to go. That's where you're going to end up if you want to survive this, or you're going to accept that you're going to get integrated into the matrix. And we like to imagine, as a function of the way the universe seems to work, that we have to be asked and consulted like we did with the jabs, but maybe it doesn't. Yeah, try the ground lamb soup. It's absolutely awesome. I will send you the recipe if you want. But lentils are really good in it. I like lentils, cannellini. What was I gonna say? Peas and carrots, and the cream tomato soup is really good. And I use usually like 4 cubes of the Knorr beef bouillon, but really good soup. You'll like it, and then you can tweak it with whatever vegetables you like in it. Highly recommend it, because that adds a little bit of a creamy flavor to it. I get distracted. That's okay. I'm glad I get distracted by cooking. I was learning how different birds would actually taste, and you guys will laugh, but I bought a slingshot today as my backup weapon. Maybe I can get some small game with it. More likely, I'll shoot my eye out. But and I'm trying to laugh at it and learn new skills, and because everyone's like, all right, I'm going to prep, I'm going to prepare, and everyone takes a real practical view of it. But this is an impractical thing we're dealing with. This is an impractical world. This is a world that has a suicide wish. And it's had it for a long time. And you look at the evil forces. I mean, remember, the purpose of the prince of this world, if you're a Christian like I am, and I hope you are, is to prove to God that man was a mistake. And letting man do what he wants is the single fastest, best way to prove it's a mistake, and just removing God from the equation so that we can follow our own worst instincts. Because whenever we think we're going to do good things, we hurt each other. And whenever we think we're going to do bad things, we hurt ourselves. And then we hurt each other, and then you understand. And so we go through utopia, and we go through dystopia, and we go through all these different wars, and we go through all these systems that are designed to protect us from ourselves, where instead we were supposed to say, hey, we made a mistake. You're supposed to go work the land, work with one another, love one another, and realize maybe we were supposed to be something a little bit more than this. God had big plans for us, not for this world. This world is just a playground. It's a sandbox. We're determined to build the perfect sandbox and utterly destroying ourselves along the way. And that's the part of fifth generation warfare I like to talk about, the spiritual aspect of it. That if you're going to resist something that's irresistible, you need an immovable force. You need a true center, and you need something around which you center your own life. And it has been my experience, and some people will agree or disagree, that's fine, but the absent faith, absent something that is literally more important to our lives ourselves, that doesn't actually happen. For us, that's what's happened, and that's why if Dana and I seem sane, you watch all these people going around going crazy with black eyes, and you see us with red eyes and just hanging out with our chickens, or with red eyes, with blue eyes, I was going to say, we're sitting here because we have reoriented ourselves. And that's what I want to encourage you to look at doing. So we'll go through all the stories. It looks like World War III is pretty likely tonight, but by the morning it might calm down. Whatever's happening over there. I mean, from what I'm seeing, the Russian elites and their deep state is pushing harder and harder to get us into a fight, because when people are scared, they make mistakes. They overreach, they panic, and they don't want to be caught second. It's like herd mentalities and behavior. Sheep go nuts and they run off the cliff. If everyone jumped off a bridge, would they? Yeah, basically. And I just kind of sit back and watch and be like, well, I might get hit by the meteor, but at least I won't be trampled to death. And so, what I would encourage you to start thinking about, and the purpose of this program, these episodes, and I'll try to find more information to put details out there, because you never know what's going to reach people. Some people get reached by the technology, some people get reached by the biology, some people get reached by the economics, but there isn't a system out there to help you. The system's out there to control you. And I think that what differentiates us is we're not trying to control anybody. I have neither the energy nor the desire to try to control you. I do this as a public service because I think the Lord wants me to do it. I've prayed on that. And because you guys have been my friends. Let's see. If World War III happens, I'll be the guy at the top of the U.S. Bank building like the chick in the movie Independence Day. Well, man, that is absolutely hilarious. But I could imagine that. We may need to get you out of there. Eki will be the official timekeeper of Pineland, given your consummate collection of timepieces there. But um, and I think a lot of people, if we're honest too, since you say that, I mean, it's something I wrote about today, is a lot of people are choosing to go down with the ship because this world that's coming is too crazy to understand. And I don't blame you for that. I mean, I would honestly say if I hadn't had the experiences I've had of a life where I've been targeted in more than one alternative substance, I don't know that I could necessarily, put these together either. And I'm not endorsing those things. I'm just saying that's the reality of what I've experienced. And I've come to realize that at some point you learn to fall upwards, and the surrealism of all this is just beyond us. And all I would say is, just because you don't see it coming doesn't mean it can't hurt you. So what can you do? Separate yourself, give yourself sovereignty, and get yourself away from other people, because the biggest thing is, unless you have people who understand, they're going to hurt you because they're going to hurt themselves because they don't know the difference. And it's a very difficult challenge. But, the one thing we have is that time is limited, experience has meaning, technology is not always your friend, and then you can use this time to better yourself. The world on the inside remains bigger than the world on the outside. You can connect to a quantum field that connects to all things, and if there is hope to be found, is therein. And so we are now fighting against it, what I believe is an unholy war. That this alliance between technology and collectivism and biological rearrangement is an affront upon creation itself. And that's what we were told tribulation would be. And, the funny thing about it from a theological perspective, because, I care about that, is that God gives man the opportunity to see what he wants to have and then experiences the outcomes of it. And the idea that we know better than God, which is the root of a lot of these problems, is also the root of this destruction that we are dealing with, and that it will go through the things that we love are the things that are going to kill us. Yeah, the esoteric holy war is the battlefront that matters, and we have to rediscover truth. And for me, look, I'm a simple guy. I look at biblical truth. I take the word of God as the word of God, and if I don't follow it all the time, I apologize for when I don't, and I accept the truth of it. There might be some pieces they took out. There might be a couple things they put in there, but by and large, it's a lot closer to what we need to know. And you have prayer and the Holy Spirit to help fill in the gaps. And if it doesn't, that's why I do the sermons on Sunday. It isn't because I like to have my throat be dead for half a day. Um, those are battles we can fight, and I just want to encourage you to come out of Babylon. I want to encourage you to bring others out. I want to encourage you to know that you have value and you have meaning and you have purpose, and the Lord intended something better for you, if you're willing to ask Him for help. And and then where's the balance? What do you do versus what's done? Before you do things, consult. It's a partnership. God is instant, immediate, and accessible. People say, well, why would God listen to you? Well, God's omniscient. God's omnipotent. He made us. He obviously has some concern. Otherwise, why would he have done it? And those are things that I would recommend. And if you begin pushing those battles and you begin looking for answers there, you might find a way away from what what's working. You're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. Hey, he ended up being a senator. Remember that, before he ended up resigning. Someone who actually resigned. Give Al Franken credit for something. Lousy senator, slightly entertaining person. Still better than modern day Saturday Night Live, I would add too, which is really saying something. But yeah, I don't know. I've given up my political career. If Pineland ever happens, I want to do two things. I want to preach and I want to teach. I mean, I'd love to teach, some philosophy classes and sit there and just light people up. They'll call me Moses because there'll be red ink everywhere, but that's fine. Not because I'm not demanding, but it would be a lot of fun. And with some of you guys, we would have, oh man, we have debates that would make Plato blush. It would be good, and it would be fun. And those are things that matter. Those big ideas, and the spiritual connection we have, and just the beautiful things, that we can appreciate. At the end of the day, you do all these wonderful things, and you find all you want to do is get back to the macaroni necklaces you were making in kindergarten. I want to do sculptures with Play-Doh. Yeah, I mean, as long as I don't have to actually put a fence together, I'll be a happy boy. Those sort of things, but that's the quality of life. And we have gone after quantity instead of quality. We've gone after systems instead of sovereignty. We've made these choices over and over again, and now we need to do something different. And I think I've made the point. I mean, I don't know. So if you guys have any questions you want to throw out here, let's use the last couple minutes here. Some quick hit questions about things happening. I did look at the news a little bit today. I actually was spending quite a bit of time working on some of my own preps, and I was disproportionately excited because I found these giant cans of like Heinz, was it condensed soup at Martin's, which is like the Big Lots up here, that are something that'll help for our preps, because Lord knows we got 6 months of winter in Maine. I still got 16 inches of snow on the ground, although it's at that point where it's like an ugly ice chunk, and my chickens are chomping at the bit. I'm having to put that stupid what's it called, the conditioner down, because the way we have this set up is not good. It's not ideal, but we're trying our best and we're having fun with it. And you got to be able to laugh. For the love of God, you got to be able to laugh, or you're going to go insane. And that's why people say, "Oh, why don't you clean up so people take you seriously?" Don't take me seriously. There's enough things that are serious. I am a farcical figure. I understand that. And yet, the fool is the person who has wisdom because he knows his own limitations. In the old tarot deck, fool's number was 0 because it was the absence of value that allowed him to see clearly what was happening. It's no accident that that was done that way. You begin to understand deeper knowledge in those sort of ways. And of course, there's limitations to how far you can take it, but if you can sometimes put aside what you think you know, you can and just look at things as they actually are. The world will reveal itself to you in ways that are often surprising and entertaining. And I think it's a challenge that we all have to take on today, because what's coming next, I don't even know anymore. I mean, however you have to play the system, whatever you have to do to get out, and if you need help, we'll try to offer suggestions. Um, in closing, I just want to say, for those who want to help the program, thank you for those who get the books. Thank you for those who get the Audible, those who give to the Venmo, CVC, PRV. And by the way, it's people every now and then, two good friends of the program recently sent us care packages. You know who you are. We're very grateful. We'll be sending messages to you. because I don't want to reveal all those people. But thank you for them. Dana and I love when you send little weird things to us over at PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. It makes us laugh. And I hope that with this program, we can bring some joy and some entertainment into what you're doing, and maybe bring a chance for us to survive and do something greater. That's the goal of Pineland. And I really want to encourage people to take this idea, run with it, and help make it your own. You know, the basic principles. You know, if there's a problem, I'll come down on you. You know, I'm good at being the hammer of heretics. You know, we'll go forward and do something really great together. So, thank you for spending some time with me. The next program, we'll see as events warrant it. I don't know if I'm going to be doing one tomorrow morning because I've done two today, and I've got quite a bit of writing I need to do. The plan is for the book to be completed. If all goes well by Saturday, then it'll go into editing. We'll see how fast that goes. I do have an idea I wanted to plant with you, though, that I was thinking that I might, in the not so distant future, try to do a fiction in an Atlantean setting. You know, the mythology of Atlantis supposedly is pretty interesting. There were two groups: the sons of Belial, the demon, who you might recognize from biblical fame, that was out there, whose job was that humanity became so far detached from its spirituality that actually we became trapped in this material frame and got caught apart from God. And then there were the I forget the name of the other sons were. I'll have to look it up. That they were standing against that, and eventually the sons of Belial used technology, and they got into a big war that was so bad that Atlantis got blown up, and that's how these different groups, like the Lemurians, ended up in Sumeria. And there's actually people, the government actually having good authority from some military industrial types. They spend a lot of money on archaeologists who trace this forbidden history, but it's a very old story. It's actually antediluvian, before the flood. That goes back that men, and especially when you look at men consorting with angels and the stories that were told in Genesis, like Genesis 6, with the Watchers, that we for a very long time have chosen to forego our own inheritance. And, you know, Christ made his sacrifice to bring that back to us. We need to remember that. But in terms of my own writing, what I want to do is share a world and remind you, perhaps, that there was a chance for us to be a spiritually connected being. Where a disconnect from God, or that we have to beg for momentary scraps, is a choice that comes as a direct result of the lifestyles we live in, the world we build around us. And to remind you that you can begin walking away from that and begin seeking that. And if it takes a while, that is okay. Let's see. Atlantis is unironically the Rashat structure in the country of Mauritania. That's pretty interesting. Well, I don't remember my mythology and my archaeology well enough, but I do want to tell stories in the future. And I think people relate, like we talked in our last episode that I did in an evening, through metaphor-based commentary. And I think it might be fun to do that. You know, in between, because I just tell you, I can't put that much more energy into survival. It's just too hard to do it. We certainly do some things. We do some gardening. We'll do some small stuff. But I was thinking, I'm gonna do all that outside, and the neighbors will end up watching. They'll just go after it. And, you know, as far as we live apart, we don't live that far apart. And we have what we need, and we'll help other people. Lord knows, I literally have like 150 chicken eggs, and I'm making vats of chicken eggs to take care of things. But eventually, it's going to make sense, I trust. And they're good eggs, so I guess there's that. But it's funny how all these practical things ultimately end up seeming pretty impractical, because you realize, okay, well, we're going to pass soon anyways. Have I made my peace? Have I done things right? And I want people to do that. I want to have heroes. You know, maybe we even have some. You know, I was joking with Dana the other day. I might write a book about the white male Christian hero, because we're not allowed to have those anymore. That never happens. But maybe I could do it, and it will involve a heavy dose of irony. I definitely am conjure up my inner Eki and run with this thing. So that will be fun. But I think I've reached the point where I've covered everything I need to cover, and just letting you know some thoughts and some ideas that I'm going to be working on, to put different ideas out there. But we'll do what we do here. We'll cover the news. We'll continue putting pieces out there. Hopefully, this show tonight gave you some things to think about, and I spent a little time talking extra to give you a sense of community and a knowledge you're welcome. So if you want to continue, the after party will be over at t.me/Atlantic Homeland. Certainly will be there. And if there's any big news or big things ongoing, hopefully we'll have some good news going forward in the future. And who knows? I mean, maybe, I don't know. Let me ask you a question, a serious question. If I ever got to the point where I said, okay, this is our piece of land, and just find someone, just say, we're going to just all go there and grab and do what we want and let them come after us, Would you support that? Would you follow that? Would you be willing to go settle private property? I mean, is that a value that's so important that we can't resist it? Or would we be willing to say, okay, well, this is our future? I mean, they did it with BLM in the West, and I don't mean Black Lives Matter, but I mean with the Bureau of Land Management. Maybe we've gotten to the point where we need to think that way. I don't know, because, I mean, if we don't take care of each other, no one's going to take care of us. I genuinely wonder that. And so I'd welcome your feedback, your questions, your commentary, and your thought on it. I mean, maybe we're at the point where we need to think like that. I don't know. It's so hard to say with how fast and slow things are going all at the same time. It's like all these big events are coming at us one after another, but nothing's really changing other than the fact we keep staring at the screen waiting for something to happen to us. And I'm just tired of waiting. I'm ready for what's next, and I trust the Lord to lead. So I'm gonna hit the knees in prayer, but I always like to hear what others think, because civilization is a group project. Um, let's see, that's pretty big. Lots. It's a good question, Corey. Lots of people purchasing plots of land adjacent to how the Amish should do it. Yeah, hopefully we can do it that way. But you know what? If we have a bunch of us who are poor who have nothing better to do, Bastille the forest, right? I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud. I'm spitballing. It's late at night for me, and yeah, of course 8:16, but I get an early start. Thoughts that I have and thoughts that you have. I mean, I welcome the feedback, and it gets us thinking. At least that's a good thing. So let me say a prayer. Heavenly Father, I just pray that you let people know that there are no mistakes, and that every one of them is a blessing by you, and that we all remember that we are your children, and that you look out for us and guide us to a place where we can exist in a way that's pleasing to you and away from this system which seeks to destroy us. We know we cannot do this on our own, and we just ask you to look out for each of us and bless every one of us, with who is in sickness, with health, who is in need, with resources, and who are trapped in places they don't want to be, with a chance to be free. And that we can appreciate the gift that you gave us through the sacrifice of your Son, our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, and that everyone has the opportunity to take upon that gift, whatever their sins, whatever their wrongdoings, and begin a new day, a new life today on this program, or as soon as their heart allows, and that allow us to have heart knowledge of you, Lord, because our heads are totally fried. So in Jesus' mighty name, I pray that. Thank you, everyone who's been here this evening. Like I said, yeah, it's a radical program. It's a radical idea, but you know what? I don't think half measures are going to save us from what's coming. If you disagree with me, insert your thoughts in the comments. And if you have some idea, and I know for some people, I'll say this: I know some people have more to risk than others, but you're the ones who are going to be targeted most. So please understand that your human geography, and you can have weapons, and you can fight, and you can have these battles, but the world you're going to have to live in, for the things you're going to have to give up. Let's say you have to shoot all five of your neighbors to keep what you have happy. You can do that, and you could even morally justify it yourself, but you're not going to like the world you're going to live in, and you're going to hate yourself. And so you have to think a lot more about protecting yourself and who you want to be, or at least as much as you think of preserving the supplies, because there are things worth dying for, there are things worth killing for, but you have to know what those are coming into the battle, or you've already lost. And that's what Corbett was saying, that's what I'm saying, and that's what Pineland's all about. Figure out what you're about and live your beliefs. This is a means-based revolution where the ends don't matter, because the end is going to be the same. We all are sons of dust. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for being with it. Thank you for those who support the program, who support us at the Venmo, CVC, PRV, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. And if you have some ideas, by the way, for things you'd like me to cover in the near future, don't get too specific. I want to do things like big topical categories, and especially about how we actualize Pineland. Definitely would appreciate the feedback. It gives me some things to think of. I have to talk at a screen for an hour and a half. Give me some help. You'll get a better program. God bless. Pinelander.